Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for our webinar in March and around enhancing your advising practice for military-bound students. We've got several hundred educators registered for us this morning. And as always, we are always recording, and we will follow up with an email has our guest speaker information, lots of the links that we share and review. We have some great resources this morning. So we are recording for any colleagues you have that may be out this week or were not able to join us, but we will provide an email summary of everything we cover this morning. With Texas OnCourse, all Texas students, no matter where they come from or where they're headed, have a plan for success after high school. If you are new to OnCourse, we are a state-funded initiative, and we are housed out of the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board here in Austin. And we're designed to improve college and career readiness and advising across the state of Texas. If you have not checked out our YouTube channel and subscribed to it, just real quickly, you can use that link. This is where we actually post all of our webinars on our YouTube channel. We'll provide you with the recording and the link in our email. So just take a minute and subscribe to that, and you will be able to also search by topic. So this is our agenda for this morning. We have some really great information on working with your students that are military bound. So we'll have a quick welcome and introduction to our guest speakers and folks that are contributing from Texas OnCourse. Samantha Kimmel from our content and resources team is going to kick that off and show you some of the Texas OnCourse resources that are within the Academy on this topic. And then we have Mark Patton, who has some really fantastic information as a military student consultant from the Military Child Education Coalition. Lots of great information on the ASVAB. We have some really great important knowledge, resources, and updates to just improve your counseling and advising practice with your military-bound students. So we have lots of great topics to cover. And then we just want to touch on, we typically in our webinars share some things that are going on at the campus level or in our school districts, how these kinds of students are supported. And also we'll talk a little bit about the accountability system here in Texas because it is tied to military readiness and those students that are enlisting in the military. And then we'll have some time for questions and discussion. We typically always end by 11 a.m. We may end up ending a little bit earlier. But thank you so much for joining us and reserving this hour to join us this morning. My name's Laura Guggen. I've been part of the monthly webinar series for quite some time now. I'm Director of Program Implementation at Texas OnCourse. And my background is as a college and career coordinator in school districts, as well as a high school counselor, and a long time ago as an elementary school counselor.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here with you guys today. And I have to admit, I'm a little jealous of anybody currently enjoying their spring break right now. But my name is Sam Kimmel, and I work with Texas OnCourse's content and resources team, making sure that any of the high school related content featured in our products and resources is accurate, timely, and relevant to your work. And before joining Texas OnCourse just shy of a year ago, I spent 6 years in the nonprofit sector providing college and career readiness support to middle and high schoolers in Austin ISD.
Great. And Mark?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Patton. I'm currently a military student consultant with MSEC, have been for the past 5 years. I am prior Air Force retired and teacher and counselor retired.
Great. Thank you for joining us this morning, Mark. So before we dive into sharing some of our resources, a lot of times our webinar attendees have the most resources and we get some great ideas from all of you that join us. So if you could just take a minute and let us know in the chat box We'd like to know, where do you find resources on advising your military-bound students? We like to collect that information, and it's also a way to kind of learn from each other. So just take a minute and share where you find those resources. Great. So I'm just going to identify a few before they disappear from the chat box. Local recruiters, local recruiting offices, today's military. It sounds like partnerships with military consultants and recruiters is really important. Veterans, NACADA website, on-site vet center. Great. So these are some things that we might be new to some of us, so we'll definitely share. Great. If you have any other resources that pop up, please go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll go ahead and share some of our resource spotlight.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. We can go ahead and move to the next slide. Alrighty, so for those of you tuning in who are new to Texas OnCourse, the Academy is our online professional learning resource for college and career advising. It's free for all Texas educators and will help you prepare any student for any post-secondary option. To get to the Academy, just click on the Educators drop-down menu from our homepage and select Academy under Educator Development. On that page, you can just click Educators, register, or log in to create your free account. And here is a sample learner view of the Texas OnCourse Academy dashboard. This is where you can explore modules to complete or check your progress on any that you're currently working on. Our modules are grouped by content area, and within each content area, you can earn badges for completing either a module or a group of modules that are within that badge. And for today's webinar, we'll be highlighting a few resources from 3 of our military-related modules, and these are all located in the Postsecondary Pathways content area that I have highlighted here. In the admissions and application process badge, you'll find 2 military modules. One is on military enlistment and one is on military academy applications. And under the entrance and placement exams badge, you'll find another module dedicated to the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, or ASVAB. Next slide. Awesome. So as mentioned, our ASVAB module is where you are going to find the bulk of our ASVAB related content. And today we want to call out 2 resources that can support you in advising military bound students. First, want to point out a PowerPoint presentation that will walk you through the requirements for providing the ASVAB to students in your district. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with this requirement, State Bill 1843 was passed back in 2017 during the 85th legislative session, and it requires each Texas school district and open enrollment charter school to provide students in grades 10 through 12 with an opportunity to take the ASVAB or an alternative career assessment each school year. So be sure to check out this presentation if you're not familiar with the ruling, or if you just want a quick refresher on some of the details. This can also be downloaded and customized to meet your needs, so you can share it with anybody in your school or district who may find it relevant to their work. But next up, we want to highlight another resource from our ASVAB module that you can show students to help explain the difference between taking the ASVAB for career exploration purposes and taking it for military enlistment. This handout lets you and students quickly compare some of the major features and differences between each version of the test. And if a student was only planning to take the ASVAB for military enlistment, this can be a great way to highlight some of the key benefits of the ASVAB career exploration program. And that's especially true since students who take the test for that purpose can still use their scores to enlist in the military, as long as those scores are no more than 2 years old whenever they go to enlist. Alrighty, and so next, I want to highlight a resource that can help you connect the ASVAB to military careers so you can support your students in career exploration. And if you're not super familiar with the ASVAB, it's actually a battery or series of tests, and there are 10 subtests in total. Those tests get combined in 2 different ways. The math and verbal scores are combined to produce the Armed Forces Qualification Test, or AFPT score. And that's a super baseline requirement students need to meet to even qualify for a specific military branch. But beyond that, the subtests are also grouped into 4 content areas: general, mechanical, administrative, and electrical. Each military career has minimum required scores for 1 or more of those subject areas, though not necessarily all of them. And so as you're advising your military-bound students on career options and helping them interpret their ASVAB results, make sure they understand that not all qualification areas are looked at the same for each career option. For example, a student interested in air traffic control will need a strong score in the general and mechanical areas of the ASVAB, while a student interested in personnel would need a strong score in the administrative section. So if students happen to score high in one area but low in another, this could be a nice way to introduce them to new career options they hadn't necessarily considered before, but some that may be a better match based on their abilities. And students should also know that there's minimum scores they're going to need to meet to qualify for a particular military career. And that information isn't captured in this particular resource because it's subject to change. So that's definitely something that you would want your students to talk with a recruiter about. Alrighty, and so lastly, just want to point out a couple resources that can support you in advising your students who are interested in attending one of the 5 federal service academies. Attending these schools comes with a lot of perks. Students get free tuition, free room and board, a high quality education, and a guaranteed job after college. And a lot of students interested in these schools have probably already figured out that they're interested in them as early as 9th grade and maybe even before then. But just because that plan has been in the works for a while doesn't mean that they've actually thought about whether the academy or academies they're applying to are best suited to their future academic and career interests. So in our military academy applications module, we have resources like those we've highlighted here that you can share with students as they think through their academic options for the future. So if students know what they want to study in college, they'll need to know which schools, if any, offer the programs of study they're interested in. In this first handout, Military Academy Degree Programs, students can get an idea of which academies may offer majors tailored to their interests. And I should note that this list isn't comprehensive, and we've categorized some of the programs broadly to help you and your students in making a quick comparison. So I definitely encourage you to direct students to each academy's website to get a more detailed picture of the majors they offer. For example, as we see here, all service academies offer some type of engineering degree program, but West Point students can major in civil, chemical, electrical, mechanical, or nuclear engineering, while Merchant Marine Academy students only have marine engineering as an option. So that may be something that they want to think through before making a decision. And if you're familiar with the military academies, then you probably already know that the application process is intense, to say the least, and super competitive. So the second resource here, Military Academy Admissions, can help you with explaining that competitive landscape to students. And as students begin their prep work for getting into these academies, including taking standardized tests, they should get familiar with where their scores will put them in the admissions process. Are they below or above average, or are they right in the middle? And again, this is another opportunity to send students directly to the academy's website, because there they can get information on other criteria that they may be evaluated on during the admissions process. Because, you know, with the academies, academics are tough, but they aren't everything. Applicants are also measured on their leadership skills, their athletic prowess, their commitment to community service, among other factors. So good to know where they stand academically, but also good to know that there are other qualities that they can focus on and really highlight. And just want to point out that every module in the Academy has an additional resources section. And this is your quick access to any resource highlighted in the module, such as a PDF or PowerPoint presentation, or even hyperlinks to external websites and other resources. And you can also find all of our resources on Pinterest. We're at pinterest.com/Texas OnCourse. And with that, I will go ahead and hand it off to Mark from MSEC.
Well, good morning again. The ladies yesterday wanted to see the beard since we were live. Just a quick summary: Air Force, I flew B-52s and B-1s, but I was also a counselor and associate professor of behavioral science at the Air Force Academy for 6 years, where I did research in leadership, team building, and women's decision issues with careers. Junior ROTC as a teacher for 22 years, as well as a high school counselor. My proud fact with junior ROTC is I have over 40 commissioned officers. One just informed me he's coming up on his 06 board. I'm like, nope, not that old yet. And I gave up counting all of my enlisted, and I'm still in contact with a lot of those kids through their careers. Been working for MSEC, actually retired short to take a job with MSEC as a military consultant, transition consultant on a contract in Cumberland County, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and then transitioned to the new global role. The beard is that I'm a beard competitor. There's about 33 beard clubs in the United States. Austin, Texas has one of the top ranked clubs in the nation. And every time you see a beard and mustache competition, know that that is supporting a local nonprofit. 100% of the proceeds go to those nonprofits. And I would say about 65% go to veteran nonprofits. So I enjoy doing that now. Next slide. So joining the military, and I did this in PowerPoint, but this is really just talking notes. Feel free if you have questions to put it in the chat box, and I'll respond to it as we go through. Just kind of talking points more than a PowerPoint. I'm going to talk about the military today, the branches, the options of enlisting and commissioning, and then where do you start? You want to click. So what's the military today? What are our branches today? If you guys would answer that in the chat box. Okay, we got Army.
Right.
Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, National Guard. Good. Okay, good. All right, next. All right, so we got all those answered, and we're going to talk a little bit more about them in depth, but we forgot one. There's the new one. Next. That's the Space Force. We'll talk a little bit about U.S. Space Force. That is a standalone force now. Next. So here's our branches. Today, Army, best explained, troops on the ground. You guys have all had that kid come in and go, hey, what do you want to do for your career? I want to be in the military. But they can't explain what they really want to do in the military. And that's kind of the gist of today, is kind of get them what are resources? Where can you get them thinking about it? We've already talked about one, the ASVAB. Been using it for over 40 years. I love that tool. So Army, Navy's maintaining security of our maritime resources. The Marines are our warriors skilled in art warfare. That's their job. If you're in the Marines, you're carrying a rifle. That's the best way to explain it, as it was explained to me years ago. I did teach a ROTC summer camp at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, that did it. And you're right, Debbie, all branches do have ground, water, and air. In fact, the Army has more ships than the Navy does, because they do some specialized transport internal to the theater. The Air Force is global reach through air power. Space Force is our newest branch, defense through technology. Coast Guard is now no longer part of DoD, hasn't been for a while. It's part of Homeland Security, and they're tasked with defense of our coast. In many ways, they do all the buoys, all the marine coastal duties. And then the Merchant Marines, and while they're not military, they operate as a military force, and they directly support. So for instance, Merchant Marines refuel a lot of our naval vessels at sea during Desert Storm. They actually brought supplies to Diego, where I was stationed with the B-52 unit. So they're not technically a military force, but the officer corps through the academy is just like every other uniformed service. Now, like I had there in the comments, right now the Air Force has been mandated to determine the career path and accession path for everybody going into Space Force. I had a briefing with recruiters about a month ago, and they're still working on how we're going to walk through all that in the coming months. Next slide. All right, so what are our options? You know, a lot of times a kid comes in, they don't understand everything that's about our services. So we have full-time versus part-time. We'll start with our part-time folks, our reserves. Exactly, that is. They train part-time. Typically, a reservist is going to be on active duty orders for about a year and a half, depending on their training. And then when they first go in, they're going to fall back to their home, and they're there until needed. They do the 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks during the year. They are at the call of the national directive. So a lot of reservists have been called up over the last 20 years and been extended for well over 10 or 11 years as it all adds up. Our National Guard forces, and there are some full-time, both Reserve and National Guard, to keep things running, but the majority are also part-time. All services have National Guard. Or actually, that's wrong. All services are in the reserves. National Guard is Army and Air Force. That's my fault. They're community-based. They report to the governor of each state. They can be called up on presidential order, as we've seen a couple times during emergency situations. Their job is to protect domestic interests in times of conflicts or natural disaster. For instance, the California National Guard has been called up basically now for the last 2 years, almost consecutively, different units for firefighting. And like I said, we have Army and Air National Guard. A lot of students don't know, a lot of folks don't know we have Air National Guard, and the actual reach that they have, they are actually tasked with a lot of active duty assignments. So what I do is when, and again, the best practice over the years, when a kid comes in to start talking, I talk full-time versus part-time and kind of get an idea of where they're leading. And that leads me into a discussion of how they make the decisions for going in the military. Next slide. So going in the military, you got enlistment, you got commissioning. Enlistment, you can do directly out of high school, requires a diploma. There are select times when some GEDs are accepted. Often you'll find a GED is accepted if you have a kid who then goes on to a community college and gets a skill set that maybe they're looking for. Every career is available based on need, and that need comes out of, in some cases, 2 to 3 years down the line. So when you're talking with a student in high school, 2 to 3 years down the line in a career field, they may find it's changed. And that recently happened last year. An entire class at training was called in, and all 28 of them were told, you're now going to be nurses in the Army. You have the following options. And I was working with some parents in Cumberland County, and they weren't real happy that their kids were no longer going to go into like cyber warfare, and they were nurses. But that is, again, the needs of the Army. And if I remember right, 90% of the class accepted the nursing position and went into it. And the 2 I was working with are doing very well. So we've talked a little bit already about the ASVAB. I love that tool, not just for your military kids. I think it's a great tool to give you insight, as well as a student and maybe even a parent, as to what is it that's pulling you to say you want to go in the military or into a career, even if you find out, maybe I don't want to go into the military. That dates back for me all the way to at the Air Force Academy. They actually were trying to develop other batteries back in the 80s. There was one called the Colorado Educational Interest Inventory, and it had good data, but it became cumbersome to try and use it. So we continued to fall back to the ASVAB and the OccuPlacer, which as an ROTC instructor, I would always make sure my students got the copy of the booklet, and we sat down as a class and talked about what that meant. The way I explain the ASVAB is you get an overall general score. That opens the door, and the higher the score, the bigger the door. And then within that, it gives you frameworks. And I'll show you a resource where it even breaks down in the website what each service skill, whether it's an MOS, military operating specialty, or an AFSC, and I think that's changed in the Air Force now, specialty codes, breaks those jobs down into exactly what you need score-wise in each of those 4 areas to add up to a qualifying score. And I think that helps students a lot, especially the first time they take it. The ASVAB is a different beast. It's timed. I think there's one section that's 14 whole minutes. So it's timed. A lot of kids don't do real well the first time they see it and go, wait, I can't handle this kind of pacing. Several, and you guys have had experience, I'm sure, with the ASVAB and how it works. I would just implore you to use it with a lot of your students, especially those that are maybe getting to that sophomore, junior year, and they're like, I really don't know what I want to do. When we talk about resources, tutor.com is available. They've actually opened their window of eligibility to a lot more now. It is primarily free for active duty. It is been open to where if you're on active duty orders as a reservist, even if it's just the weekend, your kids are eligible. You can go to their website, and I've got the full website later on, and see who all's eligible. They have spent a fair amount of money upgrading their site to include an ASVAB test. My personal favorite goes back to a while, is military.com's ASVAB practice. I've always worked with my recruiters, and I saw earlier several of you listed that you have good relationship with recruiters. Cannot emphasize that enough, that they deal with you up front about what jobs are available, kids are available based on their eligibility. But their practice test over the years, they have 3 long form practice tests. And again, my kids that I've had practice before I let them go to the recruiter, I tell them, take it 3 times, bring me your 3rd score. And if it's at a certain score, I'll take it. There's a little recidivism when they take it actually at the recruiter's office or online, a drop of 4 or 5 points, but it typically doesn't hurt a whole lot. I did see a question interested, and we'll come back to services academies, but the answer to the ASVAB is no, they don't. And I saw a question I thought about disabilities, accommodations. There are no accommodations by the military for the ASVAB. In fact, when it comes to the military, there's not many accommodations for disabilities at all. That doesn't mean someone can't find a way to qualify and get in. I've had numerous students with disabilities be able to practice enough, kind of get into a flow, and are in the service. They've gotten off their meds for a year, and they're in the service, and they've done quite well. Yes, the ASVAB test bank is a good practice for the ASVAB. The more, not just the more information, the more you can put the kid in that time situation, which is why I like military.com. They get used to that. I've got just this amount of time to do this section, and they move on. And at least in North Carolina, the recruiters don't play. If you start playing during the test, they're going to ask you to leave. ASVAB app for the iPhone, actually the recruiters developed that, Recruiting Command developed that, starting with the Army. And what they found is kids get on that and practice while they're waiting in line to maybe go into a restaurant, to go into a movie. When they have free time, they can get on there and just jump on it. It gives them randomized questions that they then just start building knowledge in the different areas. So they can pull up mechanical and do questions in the mechanical area. Next slide. All right, commissioning. Most require a 4-year degree, and the reason I put most is some require those advanced degrees. Commissioning, once you're an officer, you're basically considered the manager of a service career area in different areas. So you're going to be down the line kind of that senior leadership, but you're going to have a 4-year degree to get in. Now, on the commissioning side, you do not have to have the ASVAB. Some kids have taken it just to get ready for what they call the AFOQT, the Officers Qualifying Test. That is, again, another time test. And you have a minimum score for each service that you have to attain to be able to be qualified for field training, which is your first step toward getting commissioned, is attending field training. That's part of the Reserve Officer Training Corps. That's where you hear ROTC scholarships all the time. Typically, those open in August. I encourage all of my students, and I'm sure you do, and I would encourage you, apply for all. Apply for the Navy, apply for the Army, apply for the Air Force. If you get all three, great. Now, they have gotten pretty selective in what it takes to get to the interview round in the Air Force and the Navy. The Army, because of the size of the Army, they're not as much worried about follow-on scores. So for the Air Force to get into the interview round, you've got to have a 26 on the ACT and 1100 on the SAT. Each service is a little bit different, and sometimes it depends on the need for each year. Let's say you've graduated college, or maybe you're enlisted, you have the option of applying for officer training school. That is a 4 to 5 month long school at a particular base where you learn kind of the history of the military, the rules that kind of go along with being an officer, and what it's like to be the manager of a career field and leading. You get a lot of leadership stuff, because when you step in as an officer, you're going to be leading a group of young folks in whatever your career field is. All right, service academies. And by the way, if you go back 1 second on that slide, the previous slide, sorry, for your commissioning, I really meant to put a picture in here. So I had a young lady who was the commander of my corps, maybe all of about 5'5" and maybe 100 pounds. Wanted to go in the Army. Worked through, got her a scholarship. She was doing well in college, but she was doing her ROTC at the Citadel. Even in the early 2000s, we still had that little bit of resistance to having women in certain career fields. And she called and said, "Hey, I'm struggling here." So I happened to have a friend down there, got her in. He got into her class, saw what was going on, kind of made some changes, got it tweaked. She was at the point where it's like, I want to quit. I don't want to do this. She was a part-time model. She was working on her degree in business management and accounting. She persevered, got through, got to graduation, and this typically happens now. And they walked in and said, "Okay, there's 13 of you in class. We have 5 active duty slots. The rest of you are going Reserve or National Guard. Go find a unit that wants you." So she reached back to me and said, "Help, what do I do? I'm 22, I have my degree. I have to call units to see if they want my career field." So that kind of got some discussion going on several levels, to where when that happens, and you find that happening more and more now, because a lot of kids jump at, "Oh, what do you mean Reserve? I don't want to go Reserve." And she had done a project out in Hawaii that she thought that unit would want her back. They did, but they didn't have a position for her rank, and she would come in as a second lieutenant. Out of the blue, the South Carolina National Guard called her and said, "Hey, how would you like to fly helicopters?" And she goes, "I guess I can. My dad flew helicopters." And last year, she was, as a young captain, National Guard, was named deployed commander of an airborne battalion or platoon over all the active duty guys. And she still works National Guard, but she has a full-time career now in Atlanta. But so when kids get I want to leave you with a sense, when kids get their degree or they get a scholarship, there are still wickets that they have to work through. And it's not uncommon. You've probably been in situations where they call and they go, "I don't know what to do." And feel free to comment on that. You want to see a couple that said Army has the most money. Yes, that is totally true. It's because of the size of their force. The Marine Scholarship, I'm glad somebody mentioned that. The Marine Scholarship is through the Navy, and you request the Marine option. And even then, a lot of kids don't know, but you can get to graduation and request a cross commissioning. You will have to go to that services OTS essentially just to get brushed in on what that military is. See, is there a disability that would prevent a student from joining the military? I'll say yes, but what most recruiters are going to tell you, have them come meet with us and walk through and talk through what that is. They'll be very honest if it's a flat no. Because of the needs of the military, there's been a lot of waivers when it comes to the folks that are brought in. Now, and having said that, they need to bring something. They need to have like a high GPA. They need to have something they bring to offset what that disability might be. Now, on the emotional side, that's going to come out of MEPS. When they go to MEPS, the Military Entrance Processing Center, if that's as part of that process, they very well see a psychologist, and if it comes out there, they would probably dismiss them. So up front with the recruiter, and let the recruiter work the realities of where that could go. And I will say this, in my experience, that's mostly the Army. As we stand right now, the Air Force doesn't really have to work to get people to come in. People are at their door. The Army and the Marines, because of the size of their force and the nature of their mission, they do have way more money. Army is smart. They direct a lot of all their scholarship money and everything through their marketing program. So they get lots of money from Uncle Sam for marketing. Let's see, SAT grade requirements be adjusted if student has a strong athletic ability for service academies. Great, hang on to that. I'll come back to that. All right, so we can go on to service academies. Okay, so our service academies are West Point, the Naval Academy in Annapolis, the Coast Guard Academy up in Connecticut, U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, and then the Air Force Academy. So the basics, the standard answer: high school academic performance, GPA, standard test scores, SAT, ACT, athletics and extracurriculars, leadership, community involvement. I'll talk about those, and I'll talk about the last two. So the best explanation is, and this came from a recruiter, one of the ALOs, the liaison officer for West Point. He finally got commissioned at 26 and a half, having spent a couple years on active duty, reapplying, getting accepted to the prep school, and then finally moving up and graduating. So he was always called Grandpa by the time he was commissioned as a second lieutenant out of West Point. He said, imagine the wheel, and there's leadership, there's SAT, ACT, there's grades, there's athletics and physical fitness, there's extracurricular, community involvement, and leadership. What are the things that student control? What can you control? You can't control the physical aspect in terms of your body, all that. They're going to put you through a physical. And what happened to him is he had suffered a knee injury in wrestling. So when it came time for his physical, the knee wasn't 100%, but he had high enough scores that they said, we still want to keep you in mind. He got frustrated waiting, so he enlisted and then applied from the enlisted side. His knee had recovered. He'd finished basic training. They brought him in. At the time, competitive wise, he didn't match up 100%. So they put him in the preparatory school there at West Point, and then he accessed up. There's a prep school at each of the academies, and they have some associated prep schools. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So you look at, when you're talking with kids, really, what is it you can control? Now, when we talk about the academy, somebody's already said it, probably about the 8th grade, they should be talking. Checklists for the academy start in the 9th grade. When you look at what they're going, and obviously high math, high science. Each of the academies will probably tell you engineering is one of their primary focuses, because that's always a short career field. It's not uncommon to have college students apply their sophomore, junior year to go to an academy, but they're just like every other freshman that's coming in. All those previous classes don't count toward a degree from the academy. They still take the 140, 160 hour undergraduate degree. Now they may have classes that the material can be waived. They still have to take those hours. So when I was there, we had Nancy Galley, who now is retired, but worked on the space shuttle. She came in as a finished junior, rising senior from Florida State, but she wanted to be one of the first women to graduate from the academies. And she was very high in math, did very well, ended up working for NASA when she graduated. And there's other examples also. So, letters of recommendation. Number one, not required by the Coast Guard Academy nor the Merchant Marine Academy. Those are pretty daunting. In 20 years of working ROTC, both from the counselor perspective and an ROTC perspective, they can be anywhere from 4 pages to 9 pages. Elizabeth Dole is the one example I've got. Hers was 9 pages that had 4 full-page essays on topics ranging from why did you choose an academy? Why do you want to go in the military? What does leadership mean to you? And if you could change one thing in the world, what would it be and why? And a lot of kids reach that and it's like, wow, I just don't have that time to do this kind of an application. It's surprising. A lot of kids will just not. And so I always make it a point to say, apply to the academy, jump on that congressional piece very quickly. Now, imagine you're that military kid. I've argued for some time that I've been working with MSEC. Our seniors are somewhat protected when a military family moves. Our second semester juniors are not. And that's sad because they're often stuck either taking an extra class or having to take a class during the summer to kind of get caught up. The military compact doesn't protect those kids. I've put a proposal in that we adjust chapter 400 in the MIC3. May or may not happen in my time. But you now are that new kid and you've known you want to go to the academy. Now you've got to come in and you've got to help them go to those congressmen and those senators, say, I want a letter of recommendation. I know I'm new to you. Here's my background. And just an upfront open letter to say, this is why I want it. To a person, the ones, and I've probably done 200 letters or worked with 200 kids or more on packages, they all want to know, have somebody get in contact with them. So that's kind of my passion, is working with those military kids that move, especially our juniors, to make sure they're introducing themselves in some way to their local congressmen and senators. Next slide. These are resources. So let's hold on one second. I'll answer the question. So dual enrollment courses, I'm assuming that you mean they're in high school, but they're also taking classes at either community college or four-year college. So yeah, when you start at the academy, you start at ground zero, and that's for all 4 academies. So you're coming in with 0 hours. Realize the focus of the freshman year in the academy is really working on teaching teamwork, learning the basics, learning how to be the lowest man on the totem pole, for lack of another term. But in moving forward, you start getting to more of the academics, or that all those others you have the experience, you have the hours, but you're not going to get those credit hours. It was not uncommon to have some kids come in while I was working the counseling center that would have a full freshman year, sophomore year of classes under their belt, still started as a freshman. Now, I can give one example. One had taken a behavioral science class in leadership. We were able to waive the class, in particular the class that I taught, our second level leadership class, but we still had to make up those 3 hours with something else. And in the recent years, they started allowing kids, there's some independent study. So the kid's not taking an inordinate load. The average load's about 20 to 21 hours. I had some students taking 26, 27, so that during their athletic season, they didn't have to take as many. Hope that answers that. All right, so this is one of the neatest tools MSAC has. This is, and you can get it off their website, the Roadmap to Success. It's about 10 total pages, but the middle school, freshman year, sophomore year, junior, all broken down as a checklist. And all I can tell you is I have, especially in their senior year, families tell me they tape this to their refrigerator. And it helps in two fronts. And I had a command sergeant major tell me best. This saved a lot of arguments and probably saved my family from just all out war my daughter's senior year, because it's a checklist. So you know as well as I do, you've got kids taking AP classes. Mom and dad come in from work and say, hey, have you got that college scholarship application done? And you're in the middle, the student's in the middle of studying for an AP physics test. And they're like, I'm studying, and it gets into a kind of a shouting war, versus having this on the refrigerator or wherever they do it, and they simply just check off what's done. Mom and dad can come in and go, look, oh, that's done. Oh, this is done. It's a neat piece. You can do it electronically. And I see the link is in there now. Probably one of the neatest pieces for me to use as a counselor, as an ROTC instructor. I wish I'd had something like this. And every time I'm working with a family, I'm giving this out. In fact, I just gave one to a family moving to Florida to help them prep for a rising senior year. Tutor.com, let's see. Okay, yeah, should be one more in there. Should be a graphic. There we go. All right, so this is the main page for tutor.com. After you've signed on, you'll see their new tool is just really, really neat. You can see where there's the ASVAB practice test on there, but also their test taking module, where they talk with kids specifically, and this is one-on-one kind of stuff, is super, because it lets them get ideas on different types of tests. And because it's one-on-one, there's a lot of things that they can pick up on that they may not. I explain it to my students when I sign them up for it, is your teacher's coming from right field. Now you have somebody that maybe comes from left field, and it kind of clicks with you. You can have papers reviewed, which is a neat tool. And then on the college side, you can actually upload, especially if you're talking for academies, you can upload essays, and they'll have 3 college professors review it for content and grammar. So you get back a product that you're submitting that's been looked at already. And I've probably had well over 200 seniors use that piece just for college essays. Next slide. This is military.com's ASVAB, that if you know you're on the right page, that's it. It'll look just like that. Next slide, and my last one. Today's military. This is your Bible. If you want to get a website that will take you, that's current, that takes you to everything about the military, whether you're a counselor, a parent, both, or the student, this is a phenomenal tool. And the link's in there. So I will close with that unless you have questions. And then you'll get a copy of all this. These are all the.
Great. We will, thank you, Mark, so much. This was fantastic information. And as I mentioned at the beginning of our webinar, we'll send all of this information out. And if we are not able to get to all of the questions, I saw some really great questions coming in, Mark, that I know you addressed throughout your presentation, but we can always follow up and get additional questions answered and send them out to our attendees. Fantastic. So we're at just about 10 minutes left. So we are right on time. We just wanted to typically, we typically do this in webinars, just talk about what's going on in school districts and across campuses and in high schools, and also address some information regarding accountability. So this is typically what I do at Texas OnCourse. We work with lots of different district fellowship teams across the state. We we have several different programs where folks are using our middle school curriculum, and we also pay close attention to what's going on with our state A through F accountability system. There's been quite a few changes and also pauses with that system. For those of you who are in schools, you're probably well aware of that. But there's just some new information we wanted to cover regarding what the relevance of military readiness in that system and how schools are supporting that. So in terms of supporting students on campus, there are some regions in Texas. We talk quite a bit to, for example, our district teams in the El Paso area, as an example, that have strong connections in that region, Region 19, as an example, just regarding connecting their students and families with a military liaison. If you're not familiar with a military liaison, this is a person from the military, several different branches, and their main role is to create a partnership with the school, also help support families with anything related to school. So we have several schools that we've talked to provide examples where their military liaisons meet with the family, also provide a welcome packet and an overview. It is just a really great resource in terms of helping families, especially at the high school level that are highly mobile. Mark addressed, some of the challenges that can happen when students are transferring. Junior year is often seen as more important than senior year academically. So our mobile students that are moving schools require a lot of guidance and also just partnerships with the school and the counseling center. So if you are not familiar with military liaisons that might be available to you, I think Tama is going to go ahead and add, yes, we had, that is the resource list right there through the Department of Defense, and how you can figure out who your school liaison officers are and connect with them if you have not done so already. So that's a great resource that we know schools are doing across the state of Texas. And then also just in terms of student leadership, many of you, we hear from counselors and advisors across the state of Texas that have fabulous programs connected to getting students acclimated to a new school situation. And these are just some examples of student leadership groups. Some of them aren't even listed on here. I've had different student groups and leadership groups at different high schools than I've been at, but these are some of the most common. Of course, student council. Your student council, depending on, that could even be as small as 25 students, 9 through 12. But they are really great at generating ideas. And, a lot of times when it comes directly from a student, it's just that more impactful and powerful. And what I mean is welcoming students to campus, helping them go through their class schedule together, having a built-in day to take a tour if a student has never been at, let's say, a 5A or a 6A high school, and they've come from a much smaller environment, and maybe they're new to the state. Campus tours and, things that we're getting much better, I think, at thinking about, like providing an invitation for new students to have lunch with these groups. You have fantastic leaders on your campus at the student level. You'll know that. And also just, including, Mark talked about doing things in ROTC programs. Those students are fantastic, already have leadership skills. So working in programs like that, and, students are very creative, sometimes more so than adults. So welcoming new students, student ambassadors, you may have AP students that do something like this. I hadn't mentioned it on this bulleted list, but also National Honor Society. You might have community service organizations. Tap into those students. I think it's perfectly acceptable to have them do the work, and then it helps just build in sort of like social capital and connections with other students at your campus. So we definitely wanted to mention that. And before we close out, I wanted to mention our A through F accountability system. We have an acronym that's very familiar to you now, which is CCMR. That is College, Career, and Military Readiness. We have indicators built in our A through F system where campuses and districts receive grades for academic success and progress, generally speaking. So a student is deemed military ready if he or she enlists in the armed forces by December 31st following graduation. So we get a lot of questions on that. And that M is, of course, for military readiness within the CCMR accountability system. This is just an example of the 3 domains that calculate that A through F grade. So on the left, you have your A through F grade takes the higher of student achievement or school progress, and that is calculates 70% of your grade. You can see there that student achievement involves STAR scores, graduation rates, and CCMR. School progress is related to academic growth and relative performance. And then 30% of your A through F grade is closing the gaps, which is comparing student groups to other similar students across the state of Texas in regards to academic achievement, graduation rate, English language proficiency, and school quality. This is a complicated system with a lot of additional information that TEA has to offer, but we just wanted to sort of touch on how military readiness plays into A through F grades. One of the things that schools are required to do is intent to enlist. You have to document and report that in your PEIMS reporting annually. So here's some examples of things that you can do to keep that documentation. Exit interviews with seniors. A lot of districts are now doing senior exit surveys where they're documenting future plans. And then we have some links in here that we'll send out. Many schools have their own final transcript request form or an intent to enlist form, whichever you use on campus. Your documentation is your documentation, but it's great to keep that information. You can also keep students where students provide recruitment letters as well. In terms of what's going on currently with A through F, in the last couple of years, school districts have been reporting military readiness and the students that are planning to enlist through PEIMS submissions. Currently, because of some discrepancies in the data, military readiness has not been included within the A through F measurements that I just described. There was some, I think, some confusion on reporting students that were taking the ASVAB and things like that. So as many of you know, also in the last couple of years, this school year and last school year, due to COVID-19 and the pandemic, A through F grades have been paused. So where are we at? What's the status? School districts are still required to report. So the documentation I just described is still important to do. And then the state of Texas and TEA is working on obtaining military readiness data from the Department of Defense. And when that happens, military readiness will then be calculated as we described. Because we are at time, I'm going to go ahead and just open. We'll take, I think, 5 minutes for additional questions. If there's anything you would like to address, Mark, thank you so much for putting in your email. If there's any other questions, please go ahead and put those in the chat box. And thank you all so much for attending. And if we run out of time, we can keep your questions and also answer them later in our email summary. This is great. And I'm not seeing any additional questions. I want to be really conscious of everyone's time since we are at 11 a.m. I hope it was informative. I see lots of thank yous in the chat. Thank you all so much. Also, thank you to Sam Kimmel on our content team and Mark Patton. Thank you so much. And we will be in touch with the recording.